Welcome to the Institute for Church Leadership. My name's Andy. I work here at the college. Welcome if you're watching online, either live or later, as I like to say. I watch a lot of later stuff. You guys too? Later. I watch it later. It's always good. Good content. This content always lives on the internet, so you can always go back and refer to it or email it to a friend if you think they would enjoy the content or maybe need to hear about the topic at hand for some reason. Hey, today I am really stoked. We have Amy Simpson with us. Amy is a really smart individual who does a lot of cool things, but she's a writer, she's a speaker, she's written a couple of great books with another one on the way. Let me show these to you. Anxious, Choosing Faith in a World of Worry. Great title. I look forward to reading that one. Troubled Minds, Mental Illness, and the Church's Mission. Very interesting topic. We were just talking about it at lunch here. The church does not handle mental illness very well all the time, and we want to make sure that we're prepared as church leaders to do a great job with that. So anyways, another great resource for you. And then one coming up, she's writing her third, and this is just really intriguing. Blessed are the unsatisfied. Finding spiritual freedom in an imperfect world. Really intriguing title. Can't wait to see that as well. So she's a great writer, author, speaker. She also does life and leadership coaching. So she coaches influencers and helps them find their calling and purpose and direction and wherever they're headed, what they're doing currently and wherever they're headed in life. You guys are really going to enjoy Amy today. So let's give an institute welcome to Amy Simpson.
To stand until I've actually said something. See if it's any good. Thank you for the welcome. That was wonderful. So as Andy mentioned, I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of different things. One thing he didn't mention is that I actually have a passion for leadership, particularly church leadership, and I've spent a lot of time thinking and writing about issues related to church leaders as well, and doing editorial and leadership work in organizations that think about that sort of thing. So for example, the most recent place I worked as an employee was a company called Christianity Today, which publishes a lot of magazines and websites and various resources for church ministry. And that's one place where I've spent a lot of time thinking about church leadership. So I'm excited that you guys are doing this. I'm excited that you're thinking about these ministry issues and some of the things that will come up for you when you're actually out there, really engaged full-time in Christian ministry and church ministry and preparing yourselves for that. So I'm very, very pleased to be part of this for you, and I hope it will be worth your time today. So one of the things, I don't know whether you've talked about this in your classes or your work here, or you've done some reading on this, but for the last several years, bloggers, websites, and other publications have thrown around some alarming statistics about clergy and their risk for burnout and a variety of health problems. And I know I've heard some of these statistics a lot and seen them in several places that saying, basically, why would anybody want to get into ministry? Because the statistics were so bad about pastors, having affairs and, other types of moral failure and, all kinds of health problems and these really dire statistics. Well, the interesting thing about many of these statistics is that they're actually false. They're basically urban legends with no clear original source, passed from person to person, or passed from publication to publication without much investigation of whether they're true. And this kind of thing happens all the time out there in in our news media, and if people don't actually follow through and see where did this information come from, and they just republish it, then it kind of takes on a life of its own. So there are a lot of statistics out there like that related to pastoral ministry and church ministry in general, suggesting that it is, a terrible field to get into. So the interesting thing is credible research actually shows that the majority of clergy are doing okay. They're actually healthy and functional individuals. But just because some of these statistics have been overblown doesn't mean that all clergy are okay, even though most of them are. And there's a reason that these shady statistics sound so believable to people, and people grab onto them so easily. And I think one of those reasons is because most people realize that a career as a member of the clergy or in any kind of ministry can be difficult. It can be stressful, and sometimes it's thankless. People don't really appreciate all that you do. It can also be a very attractive calling for people who have permeable boundaries, a hero complex, or unrealistic ideas about what they are capable of. So sometimes people get into ministry for the wrong reasons or with an unhealthy mindset going in, and that does not serve them well once they get into ministry. So some church leaders are definitely not okay. They're not doing okay. Those who care directly for people in crisis can be exposed to vicarious trauma. That means that when people experience trauma, the person who's caring for them is exposed to that trauma as well, even though it's not their direct experience. And people like church leaders and EMS responders, police officers, firefighters can experience the trauma that builds up for them over time because they're so often caring for people in these traumatic situations. So clergy who experience that may need care themselves because of what they have been exposed to. Some of them are actually mistreated or even abused by their congregations. Some of them are treated, on the other hand, like minor celebrities, and they may reach a point where they feel like nobody really knows them. Nobody really knows who they actually are, and that's a lonely place to be. Many feel that they're forced to be available to work around the clock. Anytime anybody needs them, they have to be on all the time. And most church leaders have at least some people around them who have unrealistic expectations of them, of what it means to be in ministry. So here are some real statistics about church ministry and just how clergy are doing. According to a 2015 survey by Barna Group and Pepperdine University, nearly 1 in 5 pastors has struggled with drug or alcohol addiction. That's almost 1 in 5. A Duke University study found that clergy are at much greater risk than the general population for depression, anxiety disorders, and other stress-related health disorders. Church leaders, like other people in helping professions, are at risk for burnout and health challenges. Many of them are the kind of people who really want to help others and make a difference in their lives. And I know that describes many of the people in this room because I've talked to a few of you this morning, and I know that's what drives you to be here. It's training in ministry. And when they engage with people from this place, when you engage with people from this place, this motivation, you are likely to have your limits challenged on a frequent basis because people are in need. They will need you. There's a website called pastorburnout.com, and you can actually go there and look at it. And on this website, one of the things that's on this site is that pastors actually will submit their stories anonymously, their stories of burnout and how they're feeling. So these are submitted by people in ministry, and I'm just going to read for you a few short excerpts from some of the stories on that website. One pastor writes, "I want to be a Christian and lead God's people, but the harshness of ministry is putting a toll on me and my family. However, I don't want to let God down." Another pastor writes about frequent thoughts of death. This person says, "I feel stuck with no money, no hope, no future, and I feel such a fake preaching about a God who gave us hope and a future. I am going to a conference soon about recharging the pastors. I feel like such a hypocrite. I'm the one needing the recharging, not them. I need a long sabbatical. Maybe a long sleep would be better. Resting in peace would be the best." Another person writes, "I just don't want to do this anymore, and that makes me feel very guilty. I prayed for years that God would allow me to go to seminary, and through many miracles, he made it possible. People still encourage me in my work. They love my sermons and Bible studies. I feel like a fake. And one pastor says, my heart is wounded and burned out. I never thought I would feel this way. I have forgiven everyone, and I constantly search my heart to make sure I keep forgiving. But I've been having thoughts of wishing God would end my life and just take me to heaven. I've also thought of leaving the ministry, since I cannot see the fruit for my labor. I feel weak, burned out, and hopeless. These are actual pastors who have reached their limit. In fact, I suspect all of them actually hit a wall a long time ago. And they probably bypassed several opportunities to make changes or reach out for help. So they're probably beyond their limits at this point. As another pastor wrote, I should have checked myself into a hospital when I started having blackouts and uncontrollable bouts of weeping, but I thought I could control it. That was a bad idea. Well, as people preparing for ministry, it's important that you prepare yourselves to recognize warning signs that you're reaching your limit and that you know what to do about it, because none of us wants any of you to end up in a place like this. So let's talk about how it looks when you've reached your limit. Here are 10 signs that you've reached your limit. First sign is you frequently hurt the people you love. You may be lashing out at them, you may be constantly irritable, maybe you're just neglecting them because you feel you have nothing to give to them and they're not getting what they need from you. Now, physical violence, if you're actually, hurting the people you love through physical violence, that's a sign that something serious is wrong, and it requires that you seek help right away. But there are other ways to hurt the people we love, and those can be just as important in terms of signs that you've reached your limit, because you no longer have what you need for the people closest to you and actually are hurting them. The next one is you're feeling out of control in some way. Maybe it's that you have out of control anger, or that your sleep habits feel out of control. Maybe you feel out of control with food, or with shopping, or with pornography, or your fantasy life, or something else. It might be substance abuse. You might be noticing a problem and then telling yourself, like that one pastor did, I can handle it. I can control it. We all have bad habits, but those habits themselves can be warning signs. If you feel a habit or a behavior or a thought or an emotion is controlling you, it's definitely a sign that something needs to change. Self-destructive behavior. It might be as severe as self-harm, taking dangerous risks, sabotaging relationships that you need in your life. Or it might be something that doesn't seem like such a big deal, neglecting your own needs. And those needs might be physical, or they might be spiritual, emotional, or mental. Not paying attention to what you need in life is a form of self-destructive behavior. And abusing substances is another form of self-destructive behavior, and I've already mentioned, but another one is just numbing out. We don't have to use, substances to do that. Maybe it's that when you need to recharge, you don't do anything good for you. You binge watch, Netflix or something. So numbing out our feelings and not dealing with them will hurt us in the long term. Another one is violating your own moral values, or maybe just thinking about doing so. For example, maybe engaging in an inappropriate relationship, and we know this happens to people in ministry. Giving in to lust, or maybe it's lying, cheating, taking shortcuts that you never would have taken before. You might find yourself justifying choices to try to quiet your conscience. And often, it's not a big thing. It doesn't start out with a big thing. It starts out in small ways, and then it gets easier and easier to go against your own conscience or your own moral values. So pay attention to what's happening, not only in your behavior, but in your thoughts about violating your own standards. Maybe you're fantasizing about checking out of life for a while, or maybe even permanently. This doesn't have to be thoughts of suicide, although those are always a serious sign that something is wrong and that you need help right away. For some people, they actually fantasize about having a reason to go to the hospital for a while. Like maybe if I just got injured and I could just go recover in the hospital and somebody else could take care of me for a while and I didn't have to do all of these things that I feel are weighing so heavily on me. Maybe fantasizing about running away or starting a new life or dying. Maybe you might find yourself wishing you could become a hermit or, to put an impressive religious spin on it, a desert father or mother. But sort of checking out of life, checking out of society is a sign that you have reached your limit. Emotional extremes are another one. Maybe you become explosive in your expression of emotion, or you have unexpected weeping, or maybe you just feel numb and you've kind of lost touch with your emotions. Even euphoria or intense bursts of creativity can be a warning sign here. You resent people who need you. And this happens a lot with people in ministry, I think. Finding themselves irrationally angry at people who email them or call them or want to talk with them. They might recognize, these people are simply doing what I've invited them to do, either explicitly or implicitly through the position that they've placed themselves in, and yet they resent them because they're unwittingly asking you to draw from a well that feels empty in order to serve them. So it's people actually get to a point where they think, I wanted to be in this position. Like some of these pastors I read from. They asked God to place them in this position, and now they want out because they aren't able to meet the demands of the people around them. Another sign is a lack of motivation. You may not want to get out of bed, go to work, be present with your family or other loved ones, or even engage in activities that used to bring you joy. Your life might feel like serious drudgery. Maybe you're just going through the motions. A lack of meaning or a lack of connection with God. For people who minister to others, it can be surprisingly easy to lose their own connection to God as they're, because every time they read the Bible or study devotional, it's for somebody else. It's not for them. It can be easy to fall into that habit. And so some people in ministry actually feel as if God isn't really there or doesn't actually care about them because they've lost touch with that relationship. Maybe they feel as if God is not listening to their prayers. You might reach a point where maybe the things you teach other people no longer mean much to you, or you've forgotten why you ever wanted to do ministry in the first place. That's all possible, and they're all warning signs. And the 10th one is symptoms of physical or mental illness. Now, there obviously are many symptoms that we could name here of different forms of illness, but some of the most common might be high blood pressure, poor sleep, heartburn, frequent illness, difficulty recovering from an illness, gastrointestinal problems, insomnia, headaches. Also, suicidal ideations, panic attacks, a loss of interest in life, losing the ability to function at the level you typically do, or maybe being consumed by obsessive thoughts, frequent nightmares, hopelessness, or major changes in sleep or eating patterns. All of these things can be symptoms of different forms of illness and should be taken seriously. Honestly, my hope for all of you is that you will address your needs and honor your limits before you reach the point where these 10 things show up in your life. But there's a good chance you'll experience at least one of these during your time in ministry, at least for a short time. Now, don't worry, this doesn't have to mean the end of life as you know it. these symptoms and these signs can be addressed. But they're far easier to address before you ever get to this point. And when you get to this point, or when you're trying to avoid a situation like this, like burnout, it does mean you need to stop and make some changes before you reach a point where something blows up in your face. And that something might be your ministry, your family, a key friendship in your life. It might be your own health. Something will be sacrificed if you reach a point like this and you don't turn around and make a change. So when you've reached your limit, or when you think you might be approaching your limit, what can you do about it? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have some ideas for you. And this is actually going to get a little bit more hopeful at this point in my presentation. So the first thing to do is not actually, a very physically expressive thing to do. This is actually more of an internal thing to do, and that is to check your beliefs. Our emotions and our behavior are rooted in our beliefs. I was talking earlier with Andy about this. Cognitive behavioral therapists have known this for a long time. They know that the way we feel about a situation is rooted not in the circumstance itself. The circumstances do not cause you to feel a certain way. The way we feel is rooted in our thoughts about those circumstances. So what we believe about our circumstances, what we think about them, will determine the way we feel. And they know that the behavioral choices we make also don't occur in a vacuum. They find their source in our thoughts and our beliefs about ourselves, about God, and about the world around us. Ultimately, our behavior reflects our beliefs. Now, this is not only a concept that therapists and other behavioral experts are familiar with. This is also a biblical concept. And you can find this in the words of Jesus, among other places. He said in Matthew 15:18-20, "The words you speak come from the heart. That's what defiles you. For from the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. These are what defile you." And he was talking to people who had this strong belief that as long as everything was in order in their external life, in their behavior, they were in right relationship with God. And he was saying, actually, your external life simply reflects your internal life. So if you want your external life to be in order, you have to have your internal life in order. This is a very important part of what it looks like to grow in faith and to follow Christ. Our beliefs change, our view of the world changes, and our behavior and our habits change as the Holy Spirit changes us, transforms us on the inside. We're learning more about this truth all the time, actually, from a scientific point of view. One of the great frontiers in science and medicine today is the brain. And if you pay attention, you will notice that almost every day there's some kind of new announcement from neuroscience about something they've discovered about the way our brains function. They're rapidly making new discoveries. And the more scientists understand the brain, the more we can understand how our beliefs shape us. What we think about, what we believe, and the ways we process information actually change the structure and function of our brains. And maybe you've heard the term neuroplasticity. And basically what it means is that our brains, the function and shape of our brains changes as our circumstances, our feelings, our responses, and our beliefs change. Our brains actually physically change. And in the past, scientists and pretty much all experts thought this kind of change was possible only in the first 3 years of life. But now they understand it's actually possible throughout our lifetimes, that our brains can change. And as these changes take place, they also change the way we behave and the choices we make. For example, my husband has a fear of heights, and if you knew him, you would appreciate there's a lot of irony in this because my husband is almost 7 feet tall. So it's funny that he has this fear of heights, but I didn't know this about him until we were on our honeymoon, and we were in Colorado, and we visited the Royal Gorge Bridge, which at the time was the highest bridge in the world. And it still is the highest in the United States, but it's no longer the highest in the world. And he just refused to go on the bridge with me. And I was like, why? And that was how I found out he was afraid of heights. Well, eventually I did get him to go on the bridge with me, but he did not enjoy it. It was really unpleasant for him to be on that bridge because of what his brain was telling him about the danger of being on that bridge, even though, he was perfectly safe. So when he goes to a place like the top of the Willis Tower in Chicago, his behavior and even his body chemistry change. He starts to sweat, his heart beats faster, his lungs expand and take in more air because his body is preparing him to fight or flee danger. It's that fight or flight response. Because he's experiencing this anxious response to being up high. He doesn't want to go near the edge of he doesn't want to look down. And all of this is based on a faulty belief that tells him that he can fall off, or the building will collapse and he's going to die if he goes near the edge, or something like that. And there's a certain sense to that fear, but it's also an irrational fear because it's based on a faulty belief. So in order to address the problem most effectively, if he actually wants to go up into the tower, he has to recognize that false belief and choose to believe something that's true instead. For example, more than 1 million people visit the observation deck of this tower each year. In more than 40 years, not a single person has fallen from the deck or magically morphed through the glass and found themselves free falling to earth. The building has not collapsed, even once. Going near the edge is not actually any more dangerous than staying near the center of the building. And being on the 108th story is not any more dangerous than being on the 100th story, or the 50th story, or the 15th story. These are facts. And if he can rest in these truths, if he can accept these facts, he can overcome the false beliefs that are fueling his fear of heights and change his physical response temporarily. Maybe even enjoy the view for a few minutes, and then he goes back down. So this isn't something that fixes his fear of heights, but it can temporarily have an impact on not only the way he feels, but even the way his body responds and the way he behaves. And this is true for us as well. When we believe God is in control, we will behave differently from people who believe the world is out of control. When we believe we are accountable to God, who is perfectly holy and just, we care about living the way God wants us to live. When we believe there's a future beyond this life, we live as if the trivial matters don't matter, and we want to invest our energies in what will last forever. I encourage you to think about and challenge your own beliefs, or allow them to be challenged, in 3 places: about control, power, and responsibility. And these will be important questions for you as you go into ministry. What do you believe about what you can and cannot control? What do you believe about how powerful you are? And what do you believe about your responsibility for others? When you consistently push against your limits, your choice is reflecting something you believe. Maybe you believe God is not strong enough to be in charge of the world, and he needs your help. Or maybe you believe he's just not really paying attention, and you need to avert a disaster through your own participation. Maybe you believe you are responsible for making sure the world doesn't go off its rails. And if you don't get involved in every problem you see, no one will solve it. Maybe you believe you are more capable than anyone else. Typically, these are not beliefs we pay a lot of attention to, or even think, with a lot of awareness, but sometimes we really do believe these things. That God is weak and I'm strong, or that everyone else is, failing and I'm capable of fixing this. And those beliefs will fuel behaviors that may not be productive. When we embrace God's truth about us and our place in the world, that truth can change our perspective and, again, physically change our brains. And changing our minds changes our habits, including habits around our limits, our boundaries, and our self-care. For most people, experiencing change in the way we think and behave is not an overnight transformation. Thank God it's not an overnight transformation. That would probably be difficult for us to adjust to. It begins when God's Spirit enters our lives, but we're still human, even when we follow Christ. And it continues at a mercifully measured pace as we continue to exercise faith and faithful living. And if this is an area of struggle for you at some point in your ministry career, you may need to enlist someone to help you make a shift in your beliefs about yourself or about God or about the people around you. Someone like a counselor, a trusted, mature mentor, or a coach like me. Second thing you can do when you've reached your limit or you're approaching that limit is to establish boundaries and honor them. And actually, I hope you'll do this long before you ever reach your limits. Boundaries are extremely important for everyone, but especially people who are in helping professions like ministry. Now, when people talk about boundaries, they're often talking specifically about social boundaries, our boundaries with other people in social situations. But I'm going to define boundaries a little more broadly, because I believe we all need boundaries in multiple areas of our lives. We need spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional boundaries as well as those social boundaries. Boundaries are like invisible fences around various parts of ourselves and of our lives. You can't see them, but they're there. Boundaries are limits, and they're not only between us and other people. They are also about how much capacity we have to offer in different areas of life. They serve to protect us, and sometimes to protect other people as well. As the saying goes, good fences make good neighbors. And these invisible fences can do that just as much as those real fences in real life. They also help us maintain an appropriate level of intimacy and expectation in our relationships. They help us honor who we are, who others are, the nature of our relationships, and the purpose of our interaction with other people. They also help us maintain professional standards and preserve our health. As I said, though, boundaries are not just for relationships. They're for other areas of our lives, too. We can build healthy boundaries around our beliefs, our behavior, our values, our moral choices, and our habits, protecting those areas of life from invasion. Boundaries benefit us ultimately because what they do is help us honor our intentions. For example, when I go to the grocery store, I bring a list. Nearly always bring a list with me. And that's partly because, I have a family of, we have 2 teenage kids, and a, really tall husband. We eat a lot of food at my house. And so there's no way I can usually remember all the things that I need to buy on a trip to the grocery store, but also that list helps me stick to my intentions for myself when I go to the store. Sometimes I buy things that weren't on my list, but most of the time I do stick to what's there. And this is a very simple illustration of intentionality. I determine beforehand what I'm going to the store for. I write it down. I equip myself with that list so I can stick to that plan when I actually get there, which is a far different approach from, walking into the grocery store and then thinking, what do I want to buy here? Which there's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to get a different outcome from that than you're going to get with intention. Similarly, when I shop in the cereal aisle, it's usually a pretty brief stop because my family has our favorite cereals and I just grab those ones. But if I want to change things up and maybe I'm looking for a new cereal, the number of choices can be overwhelming. And I don't want to spend all day reading labels in the cereal aisle. So like most people, I'm going to choose something that fits with what's most important to me. And for me, that's probably going to be nutrition and then taste. Somebody else might choose differently. They might choose based on taste or texture or maybe price. They're going to choose the cheapest cereal. Given my values around cereal, nutrition, and then taste, I'd be pretty disappointed in my choice if I came home with a box of Cap'n Crunch, because I don't like the taste and it's not very good for you. No offense if you enjoy Cap'n Crunch. Knowing what's important to us ahead of time helps us make choices that will support our vision for our lives and what we believe is God's vision for our lives as well. So that's where intention can be very powerful, and boundaries can help us honor those intentions. So if we value our own health, we intend to protect and preserve it. Boundaries can help us make decisions to withdraw from interaction with others before we become unhealthy, or to not engage in certain behaviors in order to follow through on that intention. Boundaries can help us maintain a healthy separation between ourselves and our work on behalf of others. They can also help us keep our family life separate from our professional life so that we can honor both. Boundaries are hard for some people. Some people really struggle in this area. For some people, they're easier, actually. It comes more naturally to draw those boundaries. Many people in people-helping professions like ministry can be very focused on pleasing people. And for people like that, drawing boundaries might seem like the most difficult thing in the world, because boundaries don't always make people happy. They will make people unhappy at times when they want something from you and you draw a boundary. So that can be very difficult, especially for people who are, very focused on making other people happy. For other people, like I said, it's easier. It comes more naturally to draw boundaries and to stick to them. But sometimes people who are actually good at boundaries are judged in the Christian community, especially if they're in ministry, because that does not fit the expectations often of what people think people in ministry should be like. We have a largely unspoken expectation in our churches that people in ministry should be completely open and available to others at all times. Not everybody thinks that, but a lot of people do, even without really thinking about it. That's their expectation. Closing ourselves off, or going away and taking a break, or simply insisting on a full night of sleep, these things are sometimes considered acts of selfishness, even though all of them are modeled by Jesus in his own ministry. Actually, refusing to draw boundaries can itself be an act of selfishness, an act of pride. Because often what people are doing is trying to make themselves feel better by allowing their boundaries to be crossed. Drawing boundaries and walking away requires acknowledging that you are not the complete solution to anyone else's problems. And sometimes it's hard to acknowledge that. Sometimes it appeals to our pride to think, I'm the answer. I'm the one this person needs. You are not, nor will you ever be, the complete solution to anyone else's problem. And if you think you are, you actually have a problem of your own. And that belief will take you down. Drawing a boundary also requires accepting that the world will not spin off its axis if you go to sleep. So it can hurt our pride at times to draw boundaries for ourselves, even when it's the good thing and the right thing for us to do, to care for ourselves and other people who depend on us. If you insist on being available to the people in your ministry or other people in your life 24/7, your family will suffer, you will suffer, and the boundaries will be drawn by other people. Those boundaries might be drawn between you and your family, not what you intended. So it's not that, if you don't draw boundaries that your life will have no boundaries, that it will, but you won't be the one setting them. People who try to keep everyone happy never succeed. I can promise you that. It still has not been done. No one has pulled it off. They usually end up disappointing everyone by trying to please everyone, because it's impossible to keep everybody happy. Drawing boundaries is a much better way to ensure that we end up living as we intend to live, honoring the priorities and values we want to honor, nourishing the relationships that are most important to us, and taking care of our own health. Part of restoring yourself Honoring your own limits and living a sustainable life is in establishing boundaries that fit with the things that are most important to you. And in order to do that, you need to understand what's most important to you. Another important element in establishing a foundation for good boundaries is acknowledging your needs and limitations. So you need to be aware of and accept what you need and just how much you can do and how much you can't. So challenge yourself to establish boundaries that support your limits, your personal and moral values that you don't want others to dishonor, the vision you have for your life, your spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional needs, and your limitations as a human being. And I encourage you to start practicing this now, because as you establish this habit, it will pay off for the rest of your life, and you'll get better at it as well. Finally, you can live better. When you've reached your limit, that experience signals a need for change in your life. The change might be small or it might be big. Depending on what happened when you reached your limit or maybe reached beyond your limits, the change might be forced upon you. It's far better to choose a healthy lifestyle before you ever reach that point. So here are some tips for keeping your own needs in view, getting healthier, and maintaining a healthy you. Address your needs for healing. If necessary, engage in therapy and understand how your wounds have shaped you. Get healing for those wounds. For example, adult children of alcoholics are notorious for struggling with boundaries. This is not because they're incapable or they're weak or they're more loving than other people. It's because they grew up in homes with patterns of alcohol dependency and codependency, where boundaries were rarely enforced with consistency and in a healthy way. This doesn't doom a child of an alcoholic to a life without boundaries. It means that a person who has this reality in their life needs to do the work of understanding how their experiences have shaped them and to move toward healing. And this is true for other people as well, really for all of us. We all have wounds and ways that we need to heal. This work can make people stronger and healthier than they might imagine. And this principle applies to all of us. Understand who you are and what you are called to. You must understand and respect not only your limits, but your limitations. You cannot do it all. I'm sorry to disappoint you if that's the track you thought you were on. You're not. None of us can do it all. You have to respect not only yourself, but others as well, trusting that they have access to resources beyond you. Again, you are not the only answer. Help give them access if necessary. And you have to trust God that He is capable of doing His work without you. Exercise humility. You are not the answer. This world doesn't need you more than it needs other people. It needs us all. You don't carry the world on your shoulders, and you won't. Be proactive. Establish your boundaries before you need them. If you're establishing a career, starting a new job, maybe building a new ministry program, you'll probably have to work hard to get it to a point of sustainability. But be careful about establishing an unhealthy kind of momentum. There's a temptation here to think, I'm going to work really hard and like overwork and work all the time until I have this thing established, and then I'll back off. But the reality is the way you start will shape people's expectations of you. It will also shape your own expectations of yourself. And then if you're like me, you will expect yourself to operate at that same pace in the future. And when you back off, you may feel like you're being lazy or selfish because you know you are capable of more, even though that wasn't what you ever wanted for your daily life. So think about your boundaries before you start and establish habits that reflect the way you want your life to be in 10 years. Set a date or some specific goals that will tell you it's time to back off. If you do need to, overwork or change those boundaries for a short time, set a date or some goals that will tell you, I'm going to do this until then. And then live by healthier boundaries. Make a commitment to yourself and hold yourself to it. This is important. Be consistent. Not just reacting in the moment when you're tired, but drawing a boundary and sticking to it is really important. It's easy to maybe draw a boundary one week and then cave in on it the next week. And if you want people to take your limits seriously, you need to take them seriously as well. That doesn't mean we can't make exceptions. Of course we can. But being consistent with our boundaries really is key. I kind of made reference to this already, but you need to get ready to disappoint people if you're going to draw boundaries and live a healthy life. This comes with the territory when you're setting and enforcing boundaries for your life. Not everyone will be happy with you all the time. And this, I promise you, is something you can survive. It's possible to live well when people are disappointed with you. We all have to figure out how to do that. Keep in mind, again, if you don't disappoint someone, you are going to disappoint someone else. Maybe someone very close to you. Nobody can keep everybody happy all the time. This goes with the territory. Manage your expectations. Understand that helping people can be hard, and it's the kind of work that never feels done. You cannot save the world. You can't even really save one person. You don't have that kind of power. You can be there. You can be part of the process for someone, but you aren't the only answer or the complete answer. So, as they say, do your best and let go of the rest. Care for yourself physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, and mentally. Understand and recognize your own needs. Acknowledge that it is not wrong to care for yourself. If you work yourself to death or burn out, you will not be doing anyone any favors. In fact, you'll likely be doing shoddy work long before you reach your breaking point. It doesn't help. Find friends who will let you be honest and who will be honest with you. This is pretty self-explanatory, but you will need friends who are not in a professional relationship with you. Bonus if they're also in a similar profession. Maybe they're also in ministry and they can relate to what your daily life is like, but they're not part of your ministry. Understand your strengths, your weaknesses, potential trouble spots. Maybe take a quick personality test. Consult with a counselor or a coach. Talk to people who know you well. Reflect on your history. What are you likely to struggle with based on all of that? What pitfalls do you need to avoid? Go into leadership with your eyes wide open to your own shortcomings and the things that might ensnare you. Take pains to avoid those snares because you can see them beforehand. Establish good habits. Sleep well, exercise, eat well, engage in your own regular spiritual practices. Take time off. Spend time unwinding at the end of the day. Invest in your family, in your close friends. Manage your stress level as best you can. Do things that bring you joy. Hobbies, time with friends, spending time alone, creative activities, sports, whatever they are for you. All these habits are very good for your mental and emotional health. Keep learning and growing. Don't ever give up on yourself. Don't decide that you know enough or you're good enough or you're just too tired. Learning and personal growth are good for us in all kinds of ways, and they'll make us more effective and more interesting. And they're very good for our brains throughout our lifetimes. And finally, get help at the first sign of trouble. Early intervention is critical no matter what problem you're facing, and it's particularly important for mental health issues and for many physical problems as well. The sooner you address an issue, the better off you'll be. Your ministry matters. Your calling matters. The unique ways you express God's image and character matter. The constant work of helping others can cause us to lose sight of our own needs. It can also be depleting, and depletion provides fertile ground for all kinds of trouble. So the more you understand what your work demands of you, the more you'll understand how important it is to be at your best and your most healthy. Although it's sometimes hard to prioritize our own health, and sometimes we believe it's selfish, to make ourselves a priority anyway, this is critical. You will be called upon to help people who need you to be well cared for and to be at your best. You are responsible for that. Thank you for your time. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but if you...
Thanks, Amy. Thank you. So good informationally. I don't know where to start, kind of. But let's start with this idea, because this was actually probably because it was recently for me again a new level of understanding. Like, God does not need my help, right? And it really brought me a lot of peace to think about that way. Mm-hmm. But we kind of operate normally like, if I don't do this, the kingdom doesn't advance. Yes. Right. Go a layer down on that very issue, because I think that is freeing for everybody if you kind of realize that, but where's the balance, or what, why does God choose to use us then in that way, or why did he call us if he doesn't need us? Can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, great question. And so many times with these issues, we think they're external issues, we think they're behavioral issues, and they just always come back to our theology, or they start there, But yeah, understanding, it is important to understand that God doesn't need us at all. He chooses to use us, and it is a great privilege to be used by God. He gives us the gifts we need to do good things in his name, and he takes delight in our service to him. But that's not the same as him needing us. If you compare it to maybe, I mentioned I have 2 kids, they're teenagers now, but when they were younger, sometimes they thought it was fun for some reason to help me clean the house, which they don't think that's fun anymore for some reason. But if you imagine a toddler who's like, I want to sweep the kitchen, and they get out you give them the broom, and you kind of give them a couple lessons in sweeping, and you help them a little bit, and they sweep the kitchen and do a substandard job of it. But as a parent, I'm taking delight in my child's efforts to help me and to do something good, and she's expressing some herself in that task, and all of that it's good stuff. I don't need her to do that job, but I love it that she's doing it, and I'm gonna put that to good use. It's an imperfect illustration, but that's sort of, I think, the way God relates to us at times. He has things for us to do, but he's not devastated if we choose not to do them, or we do them imperfectly. His plan is not derailed by that.
Right. Yes. He's not dependent.
Yes.
On our efforts. Thank God. Right.
Yes.
Thank God. Yeah. So that's really really good stuff. You know what? We're gonna land here, because I know you've got your books for sale in the back. I'd love for you to just be there, have some conversations too. If you want to talk to Amy about something further, she'll be back there. You don't have to buy a book to talk to Amy. Just go back and talk and hang out. But they are on sale back there. Really quick, if you're an Institute student, don't forget to sign in. And I just want to remind you that in 2 weeks, we have Nancy Beach with us. Nancy is going to be talking about navigating how men and women operate together, work together in a local church setting especially. If you are a guy, you just don't know what you don't know. You need to listen to this talk. If you are a female, you can tell the guys by you that the rules are not the same for a female in the church, workplace, or any workplace, but we're going to be talking church, of course. So I think this is a critical topic for today. I encourage you to talk to your staff of your church where you work and get them to come to this or watch online, because it's going to be really, really helpful. But again, Amy, thank you very much. We really value at Nebraska Christian the idea of mental and emotional health, and want to keep that in front of our students and staff. So thanks so much for being here today. Let's thank her one more time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Smith, you may go. Thank you for being here.